Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the season two, episode two installment of JKL Media Talk Everything. We're doing Severance. Goodbye,
Goodbye.
Mrs. Selvig. So, the first episode was the any viewpoint of what had happened since the season one cliffhanger, and then episode two, we get the Outie version of it. But before I get too far into it, I want to introduce my co-hosts. In the blue corner, we have Jesse. Hello, Jesse.
Hello, Lou.
And in the red corner, we have Karen.
Hello.
And I'm in the middle in green. So we're trying to pick up on the RGB motif that is prevalent in this series. And before we get into the series, just quick thoughts. So, Karen, without getting into specifics, what was your overall impressions of the episode?
I love this show so much. I mean, I'll
Hmm.
say that right now. It's incredible that I feel like it's kind of like the flash forward in Lost, where they
Hmm.
turn things on its head. And so we get to see how things worked on the outside in this episode, which is something that you might think, hey, I want to see that, but it's not a pressing need for me, at least.
Hmm.
And it definitely gave me more information that informs the entire outlook on this show, the innies as well as the outies.
All right.
Yeah, I really was happy with this. I shared with you guys last time that I had not had a chance to watch episode one of the second season a second time. So this time I watched them back to back. I watched episode one, watched episode two, and I enjoyed one a lot more knowing that two was going to be right there.
Hmm.
And it was kind of cool. I didn't realize that I wanted this storyline to be split between Innie and Outie till after the fact. And I said, yes, that's the perfect way to do
Yep.
this.
Yep.
I'm so glad they did this.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, during the first episode, I was going, well, okay, you're talking about what happened on the outside. So what happened on the outside?
Yeah.
But, it builds up the anticipation so that when in the second episode they go outside, it's going, oh, okay. And plus certain things that are revealed in episode one, especially with Helly, have much more impact when you go outside into the full episode. So, yeah, I thought it was a really good episode. The other thing that was very interesting is we got our new show intro credits for season two, which are quite a bit different than the ones that we got for the first season. So I asked you two to do the little homework here and watch these two trailers and so that you could talk about them. And Jesse, what are your thoughts on the season two trailer versus the season one?
Well, I have to admit that when I watched the first episode, I skipped the credits, just went right back to the story. And then after the fact, when you said, hey, the credits changed, I went, oh, crap. Okay, I might need to look at this. And so I did. And I love the fact, similar to Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon, they're changing this. And so I thought that was very, very cool. And how they're trying to show this. It just was I really was happy with that. And I don't like to do homework necessarily before talking to a show.
Hmm.
And so don't want to spend too much time trying to figure out what they're telling me.
Hmm.
But the especially the second season with the innie and outie and each changing places and morphing and doing
Hmm.
really fascinating.
All right. Karen.
Yeah. I mean, the symbolisms in each opening intro, last season's and this season, are abundant. And if we sat down to analyze each season's intro, we would miss all kinds of things. I do like the allusions to the innie mark helping the outie mark and the outie mark helping the innie mark, where he's carrying himself through the book that Mrs. Corbell is looking at. On one side, the innie's carrying the outie and the outie's carrying the innie. So I'm guessing that means that both sides of himself are going to work together to try and figure out what's happening. And the fact that Selvig is Corbell, sorry, is looking on, that's interesting as well. The last scene where he sees a woman at the end of the hallway in the elevator, it flickers between Gemma and Helly. It's
Mm.
both people flickering there. So,
Mm.
which woman is he going to gravitate to, because he's looking
Hmm.
down the hallway at her, and there's a stop, it's red above that elevator. So
Yeah.
there's so many things in this, and the colors are everywhere where it looks like he's removing the chip from his brain. He is emerging from his brain at the end. His brain is green, which I think is interesting too. There's just so many. And we see the balloons. I mean, there's balloons everywhere in this, where last week we saw the balloons with his faces on them,
Yeah.
and now we see balloons as heads. I mean, there's just so much in this season's opener. Last season's opener had the same kind of thing, and I kind of got used to it. But looking back at it, it also had that sort of thing.
Sure.
This one, I'm really like, oh, what's going to happen because of this, because of that, So,
Yep.
and overall, I just want to say a lot of people are commenting on the official YouTube page for each trailer that, oh, another AI opening. None of it is AI. None of it. It's all done by, and I can't remember. I'm terrible. It's all done by this one guy.
Yeah, I think Ben Stiller said he found him on Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's crazy good, this
Hmm.
guy. There's a scene where Mark's head turns into a goat,
Yeah.
and goats everywhere in this. So
Hmm.
where are they coming in?
Yeah.
And that was actually, they had people paint those images like a stop motion,
Oh, okay.
only in oil.
Mhm.
So I love that this is all done by a person. None of it's AI, and it looks incredible. And this
Hmm.
guy, what a great pick to do this. I actually went to the link of his YouTube page,
Okay.
and wow, he does some weird stuff.
Oh, okay.
Oh, nice.
So
Oh,
he
okay.
does
I didn't
some
realize it.
weird morphy things, and
Right.
it's so awesome.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I had a little bit of a different read on the Innie and Outie helping each other from this trailer. I felt in the first season trailer there was more a theme of duality and integration of the two personalities. In this second season trailer, I get more the vibe that the Innie is trying to get out of the Outie, especially that last shot where the Innie Mark is trying to crawl out the back of the head of Outie Mark. So to me, there seems to be more of a contest of wills vibe than I'm getting from this trailer. And one thing I've picked up on, I think this trailer also is capturing highlight moments from the overall season as well. I don't know if I picked that up in the first season as much, but this time I felt like there was visual cues that this is being plucked from a particular episode, like the balloons. So
Mhm.
far we've seen, and I know from the season two trailer, there's a scene where they're outside with green hills, and that was present in here as well. There's also a couple of scenes with them, like in a ice scape, snowscape kind of landscape. So I don't know if that's a play into it. It was interesting. I think the show is going deeper, and that was exemplified by Mark climbing down the stairs into what looks like a basement where the more of the brain is in that. So there's a lot of stuff going on here, and I just got a more I think this one has a darker vibe to it, and I think that's where the season's going to go a bit darker this time. I don't know if Jesse will like that or not. We'll have to see. But,
Yeah.
and I think this is exemplified, and we'll get into our discussion now of the episode itself, is for me, the Outie Mark seems very touchy, very cynical, and
And a little more volatile, I feel.
yeah, so it'll be interesting to see where things go. And so usually we break this down by characters. I do think I'll follow that format here.
Can I mention one more thing about the opening that I
Sure,
forgot to mention?
sure.
When he's on the ice, it also shows Gemma's car in the background, halfway submerged.
And two,
Says to me they might show a flashback of
yeah, and you
something else.
mentioned Mrs. Cobell or Selvig like sort of towering over everything.
Yep. Yeah.
And the other thing that's weird is all those babies.
Yeah. And in the last scene, there's a baby crawling by him
Hmm.
on the bed, and that is Kier, apparently. It's the
Yeah,
head guy. There's also little nods to the other people in the show. Like there's a mug with
Irving.
Irving's face on
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
And also he's kind of dressed like a prisoner in this one, right? In an orange jumpsuit. It's
yeah,
a onesie,
yeah.
but
Mhm.
I want to talk a little bit about Devon, Mark's sister, just briefly. She doesn't play a large part in this, but she's being used as a sort of a foil, I feel. And the one, I don't know, it was sort of played for a laugh, but when she asked Mark what her name was, and he said Persephone, and said spell it, and he says never. I thought that was an interesting, that might be just a throwaway moment because I looked up Persephone is the queen of the underworld. She also is known as the goddess of spring. She's also known by the name Kore, Kore, which is interesting. And her story is that she was tricked into going down into the underworld, and she can only come up into the regular world for a period of time, and that's usually to mark the start of spring. So, interesting reference. And taking that a little bit further, Karen, how did you find how she was interacting with Mark? How did that strike you?
Persephone is also, she was also tricked into marrying Hades,
Hmm.
and she's known as the goddess of spring. So again, I don't know why that ties into anything here. I think it's her name isn't Persephone, obviously. And why Rickon calls her Becca, something like that, because her name is Devon. I don't understand that. So there's a lot of things around Devon that I want to know now. Where last season she was an interesting character, but I didn't have a burning need. And also her obsession with finding out about Gemma. It's like it transferred from Mark to her because, Mark had this kind of sadness, just overall depression about Gemma. And you feel like his quest as to why Gemma was killed was never really answered in the first season. And now it's kind of transferred to Devon. And he is upset, and rightly so, saying that speech that he gave her at the diner where it's like, did your sheets smell like her for a long time afterwards, for months afterwards? I mean, that was so sad. And it really does kind of put Devon in her place, but she's not going to give up. So is she going to be the Outie for searching for Gemma, where the any Mark is going to be the one searching for Gemma? That's definitely something to look for. And now I'm incredibly curious about what her relationship with Gemma was.
Hmm. I have another question about her in general, but let's hear from Jesse first, what he thought of her in this episode.
So I really like this character. I think she truly, truly cares about her brother and is worried about him. I do not understand how she puts up with her husband.
That's
When we get to him, I mean, he is clueless. The question is, like, there's a point when Dylan says, read the room, right, to his
Yeah,
wife over the phone. Read the room,
yeah.
Rickon. But he is truly um, one of the most selfish people seen on film.
Rickon is
Uh,
all about Rickon.
yes. And so I loved Devin and then going like to the coffee shop with, Mark. The and I agree with you. Outie Mark seems to be, and maybe it's just because I've gotten used to watching this,
hmm
but Outie Mark seems a lot less likable than he was the first season. And it is, I feel like they've done a better job of showing the difference. When we get to it, I think Outie Dylan and any Dylan, Outie Irv and any Irv seem to be a lot closer in personalities.
hmm
But yeah, just I really like his sister, and I like her worry and her going, she's smart enough to know this wasn't about the baby.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You're holding this picture of your dead wife,
Yeah.
and you're saying she's alive. I I don't think that is necessarily a coincidence.
No.
And everyone
Sure.
else is trying to say, "Oh, no, 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 he's talking about the baby."
Hmm.
Because of
Yeah.
course Rickon thinks that. Rickon doesn't care. He's just,
Nope.
Yeah.
let's talk about my book. And oh, how
Yeah.
wonderful that any
Yeah.
Mark thought I'm a genius,
Yeah.
right?
Curious.
Yeah. I mean, he is really good, fun, comedy relief.
Yep.
But God, in real life, it would be someone I just would not want this at all.
I have to say, Devin would be the only character out of those three that I would ever want to hang out with.
Hmm.
Mm.
Even in season one, I wouldn't have wanted to hang out with Mark.
Yeah.
He
Mark's
was just
damaged goods.
morose and
Yeah.
yeah,
Damaged
yeah,
goods for sure. Yeah, you asked the question I was at, like, about Devon, given how her character is in that, like, what does she see in Rickon? Like, I just don't see the connection between those two characters at all. It must be in the book that he wrote that kind of encapsulates or crystallizes the things that she likes about him. But in their day-to-day activities, it's just like, and you see with, like, when Mark is trying to talk to Devin at the house, how he's just interrupting, and the things that you're saying are just so stupid,
yeah.
and so blind to,
So,
no
He's
empathy towards.
disconnected.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
he really is.
And I had a family member multiple years ago that had a few issues
Hmm.
mentally, and it would be just they would all of a sudden we'd be talking about topic A, and all of a sudden just would bring up topic B, which had nothing to do with it. It just like, so, you know, what did you think of the latest Pixar movie? We were talking about something else, and not to try to change the subject, just truly when they thought of something, they could not say it.
Right.
And he has that ability.
Yeah.
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 His book title is The You Are,
Yeah.
Yeah,
which really he's talking about you, but really he's talking about himself.
yeah,
Yeah.
That's what I get from the book. And yeah, I agree. What on earth does she see in him? And also, we also see Milchek reading the book at one point. So
hmm
is that something that like he's connected to Lumen in some way,
That's
or
what
he's
I'm wondering
been
too. Yeah. Is he on the payroll or something? Like,
right?
this is the kind of questions the show it gets you to ask. You have to kind of
hmm
think that they might be that entrenched, or have their tentacles everywhere, because, like, the whole thing with Gemma's death, like, Mark tells, like, he saw the body, like, he had to
Yep.
identify the body. So, like, what
yeah,
exactly is Lumen up to? Like, how nefarious is this company? And we'll get into it a little bit later when we talk about Helly, but, they obviously are a very powerful multinational corporation, and who knows what they're able to do.
yeah,
So, before we jump into that other things, I still just want to sort of round out the conversation with Mark, because he doesn't really have a lot to do this episode except sort of react to. I think another role that Devin plays is she's asking the questions the audience would ask.
mm,
Why this, why that? And with Rickon, you think, well, he must be working for Lumen because he's misdirecting him from, thinking that it was in reference to the baby as opposed to his wife,
yeah,
which Devin doesn't buy at all, and Mark doesn't either. But he doesn't really want to talk about it, so he doesn't say too much. This Mark must be how the Mark reacted when he thought his wife died. I think this is the
yeah,
Mark that we saw. This is the why this Mark got severed in the first place. Jesse, what
yeah.
what are your thoughts on that, and anything else you want to mention about Mark in this episode?
Yeah, I do think that watching this both episodes a second time, the idea that, when Milchek is saying, I know you're any Mark, and he's happy and he's found love, and I don't know what Outie Mark feels about that, because if I was Outie Mark, I would go, I'm betraying my wife's memory. And you see that I've shared that I just recently lost my brother-in-law, and I was talking to my sister, and she said someone came to her with kindness and said, "Well, it's got to be getting better, right?"
Hmm.
Right.
And this happened in November, and then, it's
A
not
little
been
soon.
90 days,
Yeah.
and she just wanted to go, no, it's never going to be better, right?
Yeah. I
Yeah,
honestly don't, from my experience of people losing their spouses, from what I've seen, most people don't even start to kind of get replanted until almost like a year after. Like you
yeah,
just need to take the first steps, like
yeah,
the first year after they're just kind of in a maze.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so we don't know for sure how long his wife has been gone, do we?
No,
Okay,
Mm-mm.
no. We
go
know
ahead.
that he's been at Severance for 2 years now, though, hasn't he? Didn't he say that at one point? I believe
Can we
Yeah.
believe them?
Yeah.
And
Well, no,
not
but
just that,
Mark said it.
we don't know how long he waited between his wife's death and getting severed.
That's
Because he
true.
tried to teach.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
it's 5 years
And
ago,
you
something like
want to
that.
have this discussion, and I realize this is fiction, but right, but like, is he doing his mourning? Is this a healthy way to mourn? Because
Hmm.
by turning off your brain 9 hours a day, let's assume you get an hour lunch, right? That's 9 hours a day your brain is not processing the grief.
Right.
So yeah, he's stuck in place.
Yeah.
He's running in the same place. I am fascinated by this, and I'm not sure where we get into this, but like in the first episode, it's been 5 months, Mark, and it's not. It's just been a couple of days.
A week
In
at
fact,
Yeah.
we get
most.
that because he
Yeah.
goes, I can't believe I've been fired after 3 days. So yeah, I
That
just
was
changed
funny.
my lease. And yeah, it is
Again, another great little cameo by Bob
just
Epps.
really wonderful
Yeah.
the way they're showing the difference in Mark,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
Good.
And I'm Karen, I'll give you your turn too. I'm also wondering what changed his mind to go back to work? Because I know Milchek gave him the offer, but it was irrelevant to me in his decision. So must have had something to do with that last conversation he had with Devin, is what I'm thinking. Karen?
I think maybe he wants to put this whole thing to rest, and the only way he thinks he can do that is to go back
Mm.
where he has all his any memories and maybe put things together. Who knows though? And I do think here's one thing that surprised me. They all know Milchek outside of Lumon.
Yeah.
So they know him as their innie and they know him as their outie as well.
They would be interviewed by him, right?
We didn't know that it was him, but yeah,
We didn't, no,
right.
but I'm just assuming based on how the
Yeah,
process went for Helly.
I completely agree that he's like HR as
Yeah.
well for
Yeah.
that floor at least.
And
But that's only after this episode,
Yeah.
right?
and I don't know where you're going next, but when we talk about um Trammell Tillman, the guy who plays Seth Bilchek, I watched the little 5-minute post episode. They showed him interviewed, and his eyes and mouth matched when he was not in character.
Oh yeah.
And
Mm,
it was very interesting to watch him because as Milchek, his eyes and his mouth never match.
right.
He is always smiling and, a candy witch. And it
Candy
just that
Rich.
I hate him so much. And I love watching him. Like I
Yeah.
just despise this character. And I think I didn't read the interview, but somewhere he says, I'm really not a villain, I promise.
And in this episode, you also see that he's being pressured in the way that a
Yes.
lot of them are being
Yep.
pressured as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I think it's interesting to see how they are all swayed by him as
Yeah.
outies. What is he doing? Is he hypnotizing them? Because why would Mark go back? Why would Irving go back?
Dylan. I
Dylan, I
yeah.
understand why he would go back.
Yep.
I
But
think Irvin and Dylan both need the job.
yeah,
Irving does. He said he had money up in the.
Yeah, yeah, I
right,
got money upstairs. Yeah.
Yeah.
right. And we saw he had money last season. So I don't know if he needs to go back, but I think there's a part of him that really wants to go back because that's all he knows
Hmm.
is that.
I think that's somehow he still feels like he can get a connection with Bert.
Bert, yeah,
Yeah, Dylan's needs are pretty obvious. He needs the money.
yeah,
He needs a
Yeah.
job.
right.
So,
3 kids, yeah, with
yeah.
health.
And I felt for him. I was mad at him for being so cruel to his wife, but she was very loving with him. Like, read the room.
Right.
I wouldn't,
Yeah,
if it had been good news, I wouldn't have picked up.
Yeah.
right.
And, and she's like, I'm sorry, you'll get the
I
next
think
one.
Yeah.
that's how their relationship is.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
That
I
was a
joke
good
around
moment.
with my husband like that
Yeah.
too. And then he's like, okay, I'll bring you
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
So Mark gets swayed to go back to work by
Yeah.
Milchek and his pineapple. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pineapple is a symbol of hospitality. You see, like Marriott, for example, uses pineapples on their stationery and stuff.
Didn't know
Quite a
that.
few. Yeah, there's quite a few
I was
hotel
thinking,
chains and stuff that,
first thing that came to my mind was Chuck.
yeah,
Pineapple.
right. And the same thing with Psych. They have a pineapple in every episode of
Yeah.
Psych. So yeah, it's a symbol of hospitality, and it's definitely used in this way in this episode, I think, to show that he is extending this olive branch. And now we also see why they want him there too through all this stuff. Why do they want
Hmm.
Mark there? But Mark is a conundrum. I agree with you. Why did he go back? It's not for the raise. It's not because he wants to hide himself again. But I do think there's some motivation, and I'm not quite sure what it is yet.
I think his sister
Yeah.
made him think about it, and I think that's what changed his mind.
Even though he was mad at her,
Yeah, even though,
something she
yeah,
said.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and yet, just going back to Milchek again, it's surprising to see this character elevated so much in this
Mm-hmm.
season, and equally surprising to see how Mrs. Selvig or Cobell is being pushed out of seemingly being pushed out of the show.
Yeah.
Um, Especially given the importance of her character in the trailer with that when
Yeah.
she's kind of got like that godlike towering over appearance in there.
I don't think we've seen the last of her.
I don't think so either. She might be gone for the rest of the season for all we know and come back in the third season, but who knows? The show, there's just no way to know where the show's going. I did want to touch on Milchek again in the aspect of I love how Devin was on his case the whole time
Mm-hmm.
he was in the
Yeah.
house. Karen?
And go
Yeah,
ahead, Karen.
I agree. I'm not going to go long here. Devin is the sand in everyone's eye. He
Yeah,
is
she.
so irritating. And th again, it's something with this show that even the most irritating characters are people that you kind of don't mind seeing. You
Mhm.
know, it gives flavor to the show that Rickon is such an ass. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, it does make me wonder what Devin sees in him. Why are the Lumen employees reading his book?
Mhm. Jesse, Devin
Yes, yeah.
and Milchek. Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking up. It's the when he's told, let Kier guide you, right? The same way, what would Jesus do? It's what would Kier do? And I was like, oh, that was the founder of this
Lumen.
Lumen, but it's more than just a company, right? It feels like this religion. It feels like almost Scientology. So, yeah, I'm fascinated by the relationship and the idea, right, that they left it to him, fire him if you need to. And then when they came back, look, Mark's important. He's got
Yep.
to finish this.
Oh, yeah, the
Cold.
Yeah, this something we
Cold
need
Oh
Harbor,
my
this.
God.
Cold Harbor.
Cold Harbor.
Yeah,
Right.
and
Yeah,
so whatever it needs to be, and he needs to have, including Heliar.
yeah.
And Helena did not look happy about that. So I
Oh,
can't wait to talk about her.
saving the best
So
till the last.
yeah, it does. It it did remind me that now, and really you could have seen these two episodes as a little two-part premiere if you
Yep,
want to do
for
that,
sure. Yep.
because you think back of the four, Mark, Helly, Dylan, and Irv are all there using the rollerball, and they're all like in sync. They're all happy. Like the band's back together and
Yep.
we are happy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we have Mark, we haven't commented on yet, Mark's final confrontation with Miss Selvig. And just before Jesse, I let you talk about that, I just another thought as to why Mark went back is Devin says to him, I would just like a little bit more proof, a little more
Yeah.
confirmation of the facts. And I think that was the final little thing I think that niggled in his mind that got him to change what he's doing. But anyhow, his confrontation with Mrs. Selvig.
hmm Yeah, I think this is he asks her because Outie Mark like well, he was frustrated with her,
Hmm.
but liked her, right? We're
Sure.
friends. Even though you get the it wrong, the trash things and all this other stuff, right? I liked this kind of the way they were talking about and going. And
Hmm.
so, he's asking her questions. And she's like, "Oh, Mark, they convinced you to come back. Was a pineapple involved?" Patricia Arquette is wonderful in this.
Yeah.
She is
Um,
great.
and then when everything's fine, and then he jumps on there and then go, "What about Gemma?" And she screams and almost,
Yeah.
makes him leave. Was just, oh, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Karen?
Yeah, and you sense that there's a reason she is trying to get Mark to leave,
Yeah,
to leave her alone, that she needs to do things away from Lumen in order to do
yeah.
whatever it is she's dreaming up. It makes me feel like maybe there's something there that she's going to look into and that
hmm
she will be a key player in this, but
Yeah,
she feels like she can't do that if anyone from Lumen is involved. And I feel we've learned also that she grew up as a Lumen person. She went to a Lumen school, and that's what I assume Miss Huang is, that she's in a Lumen school and isn't
oh
it?
God, I had not thought that. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
because
perfect.
Yeah,
she was a crossing guard.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep.
So it's kind of giving us that insight into Miss Cobell, that she was also similar to this kind of drone, Miss Huang, who is doing
hmm
towing the company line.
Yeah.
And you see that Miss Cobell, Miss Selvig, Miss Kos Kovig, is that what they're calling her?
Who? Sorry?
Selvig. I mean, they're combining her names right
Oh,
now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Rickon thought that, and they're like, "No, that's a horrible idea."
they're doing a portmanteau of her names. But I feel like she has finally woken up and said, uh, I need to figure out what's happening here
hmm
because of how they've treated me.
yeah.
And I enjoy seeing how Lumen people talk. It's
Yeah.
very different from how other people talk, where she says,
Right.
I believe an apology is warranted.
Yes. Yeah, and then she's like, "Okay, we've got a lot to do.
Yeah,
We were
she's ready to
thinking
go
it
back.
right."
Right. I'll think on it.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
like
And
you're
leaves.
Very like out of a manual.
and you're
Exactly.
afraid of me. We fear nothing,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that was
which
a
was
weird
chilling.
conversation.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
chilling.
Yeah. We'll get into that a little bit.
There's more layers to her.
Yeah, for
Yes.
sure. Maybe we can combine these two because they're short scenes, but each of them had their own moments. But the Irving and Dylan scenes in particular, I'm thinking of Dylan's job interview with his kind of like his mirror image of himself and his poorly received door prize comment. And the factory was called Real Doors, which is interesting.
It was cool.
Yeah. And then we have Irving trying to call Bert, and then we see
hmm
Bert in the car watching Irving make the phone calls. Karen,
Crying.
to talk about those two characters.
Yeah, he was crying.
Mm,
He had like a one little tear going down his face. And he
hmm
So what happened there? Did he also get affected by that thing that Dylan did? Did he get some insight into what his any
I don't think so, because I think he flipped four switches or three switches for the specific people, right?
right?
Plus, Bert works in a different department, so
Yeah. So
yeah,
maybe he wasn't severed. I don't know. But I think that that storyline is incredibly sad right now because
yeah,
Irving it really wants to at least be around Bert. I think he feels grounded with him. And, his phone call was like, yeah, I know why you're not picking up, but here's what I have to say, kind of thing. And then he leaves and goes back to his house. You could really see when he interacts with Milchek that he is falsely happy. I don't know if Milchek caught on to that, but he is definitely putting on a brave face, as it were.
hmm
They've all decided they're going to hide the fact that they know a little bit about their innie and their outie are kind of merged a little bit. They're hiding it and making sure that no one from Lumon knows that they're remembering things. But of course, Mark's not hiding it. Irving and Dylan are definitely keeping that on the down low. As far as Dylan with the interview, that guy is definitely that guy from Devs, by the way. He was one of the developers in
hmm
Devs, is like a mirror image of what Dylan would be in the future. I love their discussion about doors. It makes me wonder if that is true, what Dylan was saying. Was he really into doors as a kid? I also I like to think about what I would say in those situations. So he says, what kind of door would you be? And before Dylan answers, in my head, I said pocket. It's got to be pocket because pocket is the most interesting kind of door, in my opinion. And I liked how he described it as, being when it's needed, there it is, but when it's not, it can fade into the background. And everything is like a metaphor here,
yep,
definitely.
yep,
And especially doors being a complete metaphor with the real door. What other kind of door is there? Fake doors? So yeah, that's symbolism as well. And it was almost like a generic building, with real doors on it. There's no name, no identifying thing other than they make doors. The fact that this guy is angry at Lumen and doesn't like severed people, and also the fact that he doesn't like that all of their doors are made in-house, that they don't buy doors from anyone. I thought was interesting that he was really upset about that. So that guy is, I thought he was really funny and his interaction with Dylan was great. And you also get to see the other side of people who aren't enamored with what Lumen is doing.
hmm
So
Yeah, his reaction when he found out Dylan was severed was quite telling. Yeah,
abrupt.
yeah,
Yeah, I felt bad for Dylan because the interview was going really well, right?
Yeah.
I don't think he really, my thought is he doesn't care about doors whatsoever, just is trying
That
to.
was,
And then when the guy calls his bluff, and then he said, by the way, I would say a barn door is my favorite
oh,
door.
that's nice.
And then semi-gloss. Ooh, that's kind
Oh,
of the
yeah.
door prizes was a great
That
joke.
was
yes, it was.
That
incredible.
was a great joke.
Also kind of like that he took it as an insult too,
Yeah.
Yeah,
on both
And
sides.
his line of work, he's heard it very often.
mhm. And so he's sitting there going, I could have, and then the unfairly to be treated because he was severed was just kind of sad.
Wouldn't
No,
Dylan is not that kind of person.
no.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. But it is, the two actors look a little alike and they played both the same kind of characters.
Yeah,
So I thought that was really well done. Like they're going, okay, we're having a little fun with this.
Yeah.
That's with because of the whole idea of severance, you're your two sides of one coin,
Hmm.
to have that other person was just really well done.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I'm really confused on how much do you know of, because you aren't supposed to know anything about your Audi or any, right?
Right.
right.
Bert seems to know something,
Yeah.
and the thought is, at first you go, well, when you leave, do they give you those memories back? But no, they can't, because the idea you were supposed to be working on something top secret.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm really curious how this is, where they're going to come back to show us. And I think we will find out why. They will end up telling us why Irv came back, and
Dylan.
yeah, and Dylan. I think Dylan for money, because I
Yeah.
think he needed it. I What's sad is they didn't get a 20% rate increase.
Right?
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's interesting. Like the whole appearance of Bert in the car watching
yeah.
Irving raises so many questions. How much of the innie and outies are bleeding into each other? The show is constantly teasing us, but without giving us answers about that. And I think that's going to be the long game, the series.
I love that, to be
Yeah,
honest.
because it sets up this unique, unreliable narrator dynamic
Yep.
Oh
that
yeah,
that
exactly.
you just don't know what is totally real and what's not.
There's nobody
Mhm.
that's reliable.
Especially save her to the last because she's got the most interesting arc in this episode
Mm.
is Helly. Right off the bat, it's interesting that everybody's Innie's last initial is their last name, but hers
Hmm.
is not. So I'm wondering what R stands for. Um,
Riggs. Sorry, it's Riggs.
okay, that's interesting. So let's take Helly in two different swaths. Let's deal with her as a Lumen character and her interactions with her father and Mrs. Selvig. And just from a visual standpoint, the Lumen building is so much different than the Severance floor in that it's all glass, wide open, yet feels very cold and sterile. So her meeting with her father was
Mm.
interesting, and he called her a fetid moppet, which
Yep.
can be taken a lot of different ways. And her interactions in the what I think is the boardroom, but I'm not sure, with Mrs. Selvig, Jesse. What did you think of that? And your impressions of how, the difference between Hallie Outie and Hallie Innie?
Yeah, so I looked up Fetid Moffat, and it's, smelly child, basically,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
She was not treated with a lot of love in that thought whatsoever.
Right.
This is incredibly sad because, he's just so not, oh my goodness, I'm sorry this happened to you. I hate that person. No, it's just, hey, you've failed me. You're a bad person. So I don't know for sure. The theory is that she is not severed anymore, that she is playing the part when she goes inside.
I'll
Was she
say right off
ever?
the bat,
Okay.
Was she ever severed?
yes, we
Yeah.
saw it in the
Yeah.
first season.
Yeah.
Yeah. But could
I
they
just
lie?
want.
I personally don't
I
buy
think
that.
she was in the first season. Yeah.
And wasn't it fascinating her watching her person, her any kiss Mark
Which is why I
Yep.
think she's severed.
over and over again,
Yep.
right?
Yes, and I think
Okay.
that scene is the proof.
Oh, tell me a little
See,
more.
that's why I asked you the question to compare Audi to any alley,
Yeah. So Audi Helly, or, Helena,
Yeah.
very cold
Mhm.
and very reserved.
Yep.
I thought it was fascinating when she's in front of the recorder and she kind of shakes, and all of a sudden she's in character.
Hmm.
And it feels like she did this off the cuff. It did not feel like she was reading a prepared statement. She's like, I just, I had some non-lumen pharmaceuticals. This has nothing to do with us. And I made a joke, and I really shouldn't have. And, I'm so sorry. We know how important this is. And you're like, wow. So, yeah, I want to think that they've let her, you know, she's let herself be severed again and make that change. But I'm not sure. I also have a lot of questions that let Karen talk and then I'll ask a few questions.
Okay.
Before I go in on Helly, I actually looked into their last names because they said Mark's last name several times in this episode, Scout,
Yep.
which I think might be symbolic,
For sure.
definitely, of something.
For sure.
Dylan's last name is George. That doesn't do much for me. Helly Riggs, Seth Milchek. But Rickon's last name is Hale, which means, hardy, well. So that means that Devin's last name is Scout Hale, which I find interesting. Irving's last name is Bailiff, which is also interesting.
That again? What?
Bailiff, like
Bailiff.
someone,
Oh, the
yeah,
judge.
yeah.
Yeah. Ah, okay.
So there's a lot of weird things. If you look into the last names of some of these people, you're like, oh, interesting. Egan doesn't do anything for me. That's their whole, Kier's last name, which means their whole family is Egan. Lumen means illuminated, but, is that ironic? So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff like that, which I found interesting, but not all of it. So, are they red herrings or whatever? Anyway, okay, what were we talking about? Oh, Helena. Yeah, you get the sense, and I'm sure they put that interaction with her father in this episode to show that she doesn't get any caring or love in the outside world. She doesn't have that. And the fact that she is disconnected and severe is probably a byproduct of that. Sequestered, probably. I'm sure they kept her away from the general population. She was also in one of these schools, even if it was a tutor situation. I have a feeling like she didn't mix with anyone who might have cared for her. So when she sees that on the screen, she sees that she and Mark had a bond. I feel like she sees, well, if I go back into my innie, I can have this that I don't have out here.
Hmm.
Now, why does she stay severed? I'm not sure why she would. I think she is still severed, but I think they raise a question as to why she goes back as a severed employee. At least in my mind, why does she go back as a severed employee? Is it just because of what she sees with Mark? Does she have other impetus to go back in? I don't know. I feel like there's still some questions to be answered there, but she is so intriguing. And her, we talked about Londo in our B5 conversation today, how he's never alone anymore. She's never alone. She's got Drummond on her heels everywhere she goes. And it looks like Drummond is kind of their, what do they call it when someone's a cleanup guy?
Yeah.
Anyway, Drummond is there when she meets with Miss Cobell. He's there when she meets with Milchek, and it looks like he might be part of the board also, because he was in that conversation too, where they tell her, they tell Milchek, who cares if they have chemistry?
Hmm.
Yeah, I was going to ask who this guy is.
Enforcer, but
Times of he appears to be subordinate to her, and other times he seems to be her actually superior.
right. Yeah, it describes him as an intimidating Lumen enforcer who is involved with Severance operations.
Yeah.
But he's definitely two sides of the coin. Does everyone have two sides in here except for so yeah, I just feel really bad for Helena, that she's definitely a product of her environment. And I feel like Helly is her outlet to let all of that go.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah.
Just while we were talking, I looked up Egan, just the name meaning, to see if there were, what the etymology was of it, and it's an Irish name that means little fire or a little bright-eyed one. So
Hmm.
that's interesting. In dealing with Helly or Helena, I agree with your assessments that she's almost seems like she's been groomed for this role, like she's been indoctrinated totally in the Egan philosophy. Her whole life has been very controlled. I don't think she's ever had like normal friends, normal childhood. I think she's been programmed from day one. She's very robotic, very mechanical. In her conversation with Muscobel, like her apology felt totally insincere or without feeling. And the relegation of Miss Selvig to this committee, the Severance, what was it called? The Severance. She's Severance. Oh crap! Where is it in my notes? But the initials are SAC, so like sack. So she got sacked, right, basically.
Mm.
So that that whole conversation was just really showed a very different Helena to us than we're used to. Just really set down how like a Terminator, basically, she was.
Mhm.
So I think that the outburst that her innie did at the speech was totally unexpected. Whatever they thought her innie might be in the Severance world is that's not what they expected. And again, as
No.
Jesse, you pointed out, her speech, her apology just reeks of, it feels like a public figure making an apology speech that they don't really believe in, but they're just doing it for damage. It's just a true out and out damage control speech is what it is.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
so that incident, her outburst at the speech, and the way she acts in the episode, to me, like when you mentioned that she's not severed, did you mean, or people are saying that she's not severed in season two, or that she was never severed?
Yeah, in season
Season two.
two, and she's
Okay,
come back, and because her family, what I gather, her family forced her to be severed. That
Or
she's the youngest
pressured her
person.
to do it.
Fresh.
right,
Well, I think
Yeah.
to kind of show that we won't ask anyone to do anything, look, even my daughter would do this.
right, yeah.
But I believe she is not severed now.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
believe that she is undercover trying to, because they need an inside person on that, she is going in as herself and trying to pretend to be Heliar.
Interesting.
Yeah,
That
and
Her
yeah,
watching the tapes could have been her trying to figure out how to act.
could have been, yeah.
and
Though I like to think that it's her way of trying to connect with, or this is her, this Heliar is all her repressed desires
Right.
mhm.
and whatnot. So I think that's why she was so fascinated by that clip, because I'm still trying to paint Helly as a sympathetic character in my head. Otherwise,
Yeah,
this reveal of her being an Egan is really going to make it a tough row to hoe to watch her character arc through the series. And the other reason why I think that she's severed, or I'm hoping that she's still severed, is because this innie will be her redemption or liberation arc, if you will. Because if she's not severed, then this is all an act and she's not going to change, right? So I'm hoping that the innie Helly will change the outer Helly to make her a more open, warm, compassionate person. That's my hope. Potentially, if she is not being severed anymore, that does make a lot of sense from a Lumen perspective for sure.
I think her having to pretend to be Helly is going to change her. That the
Yeah.
actions of her, because I don't think the any is going to change the outie if you're severed,
Hmm.
because
Well,
it
they did
wouldn't
allude to
influence you.
I,
Yeah,
I agree that Milchek is definitely an unreliable narrator, but he did mention
yeah,
that feeling will trickle out to your Audi.
yeah.
Yeah. And
So
they might be mining the old chestnut that love conquers all, right?
this is
And
a romance,
yeah,
which everything is a romance. I still
yeah.
There you go.
believe.
So that'll be interesting to see because hopefully we'll get an answer. If they never show her going in the elevator and then going through the transformation theory
Right.
alive, and so I'm
Hmm.
sure the show is actually going to dole that moment out very carefully
Hmm.
because they might be setting up this expectation with the viewers that, oh, she's not severed. If they show that transformation, you can go, holy crap, she was severed the whole time.
Yeah.
She
Right.
was really just acting on her inner things as opposed to some outer conspiracy or whatever you want to call it.
Only one we've seen doing that, right?
Um,
No, I think they showed everyone but Helly this last time, I think.
yeah,
Doing that thing with their
Yeah,
yeah.
the
the
zip, I think
okay.
so.
Okay.
I may be wrong.
No, that's all right. I
Okay.
Yeah.
believe you.
So that's something that we'll have to definitely keep an eye on it. Karen, is Helly severed or not in season two?
I'm undecided.
Okay. Jesse, you're firmly in the
And I believe she isn't. I believe
okay.
that she is now and we'll see why, but I think a lot of it is they need her to the way they said, including Helly R. She's got to be able to tell them what's going on with the person, even
Hmm.
though because they've taken away supposedly the cameras. And
Right.
also, I think because she's never had affection, she's never had love, she wants to feel that. And so
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's why she's there doing that.
Okay. That's good.
And you?
I'm still leaning on the severed side
Okay.
because I just think that's the more interesting story of the
Sure.
any affecting the Audi.
I
And go
have good
ahead.
expectations though, because so far they haven't really gone wrong with
Yeah.
any decision they've made. So no
No.
matter
Yeah.
what she is, it's going to be good.
It's all
And
in how it's done.
and I
Hmm.
do think they are trying to make us think that she isn't, right? They're keeping that
Yeah,
they
they
Right.
I could
they're doing
actually
that a lot with a
yeah, I could
lot of things.
see
But
them
yeah,
saying that we want you to think this,
Yeah.
right.
Absolutely.
which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
They're subverting so many things in this show. And I think that's why I love it so much. Like Lou said, I don't want to work too hard
Yeah.
and let it reveal itself. But there are some things I really think about after I watch the episode.
Yeah.
So I really dig that.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. I just go throw out a couple of things that caught my eye. I noticed that Mark's aquarium has two fish in it, which is
Mm. Oh,
interesting.
Gemma,
Or is any an Audi?
that makes even more
The,
sense.
the big reveal in this episode, though, is that Mark is the prime reason that this whole severance thing is taking place. Somehow it's related to Cold Harbor. Whether that's a reference to something to do with Gemma, I don't know, but I guess we'll find out. The only reason the other characters are back is because Mark wants them back, and they want Mark to be back, so they'll do whatever they can to get Mark to come back. And then you have to watch this episode and try to fit it in the timeline of the other episode, and that's a bit of an interesting exercise. Um, and going on the whole whether Helly is severed or not, it does put a different spin on her conversations with Mark, talking about whether Jem is alive or not, and whether, his innie Mark has a commitment to the outie Mark's relationship with Gemma, and how Helly was talking about how people are put on different fronts or whatever, depending on the circumstances. I think that I got the vibe last episode that she was a little bit jealous of the Mark Gemma
Yes.
relationship, and she was trying to steer it so that the two of them are, got something going on there. So, and if she's doing that as a not severed person, whereas if it was with a severed person, that's much more subconsciously
Yep.
driven, and she's not aware of it. And that whole question about her being severed or not also puts a different spin on this, watching herself kissing Mark on the videotape as well. So
Yep.
Hmm.
it also puts another spin on the reason why they've removed the cameras, and that is it's not for the Innie's benefit, it's for Helena's benefit more than anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of interesting threads left open that we could follow here.
Can I want to mention that they really put on the fact that, hey, you guys are saviors outside of Lumen, that,
Hmm.
you really
Hmm.
brought to light all these things. That is not true.
No,
No.
at all.
no, because it's only 5 days have passed since,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
and that newspaper picture with them in the car together is total fabrication.
Exactly.
Right.
So that puts this episode puts a completely different spin on the first episode. When you rewatch it, watch both episodes back to back and
Hmm.
kind of, fit them together.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things answered and a lot of questions brought up as well. I loved seeing Helena in this episode. But that whole thing about, them not actually being saviors and that people aren't gonna see this video.
Hmm.
That
Yeah.
little video, they made it just for these four.
Yeah.
There's no way they're going to show it to anybody else
No,
when they come
no.
in.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
all the perks and everything that they're selling to the innies it's all
It's
BS.
all just for them.
Yeah.
Well, they
Yeah.
might
Yeah.
upgrade those,
Yeah.
Hmm.
but it's not going to happen for anyone else.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
mention
No, I
Obama.
just was going to say, yes, this is really interesting. The idea that it hasn't been 5 months, they've had to rush this together to show that because really nothing's changed, right?
Mhm.
I guess maybe they've gone in to say that, the new snacks or everything, right? It, I, I just think this is really interesting because there is so many unreliable narrators.
Mm.
And to go
The
back a
whole
little bit,
thing.
another thing that I thought was very funny is that Dylan loves the perks, right? Like I've got
Right.
finger cuffs and I've
Yeah.
got this and I'm going, and then this guy,
Waffles,
yeah, and then he
deviled
goes,
eggs.
and like when he's at the door company, and we give out prizes.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's like, and, I was like, oh man, any Dylan would have been like, prizes? Really?
Yep. Yep.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That he really longs for those security items.
Yeah.
Okay, so I always look into things. And so
Okay.
I want to bring up some stuff I found. Essentially, the whole thing behind the MDR floor is them sorting things into four tempers. And I'm assuming that's kind of like the four humors that things used to use in old time. And the tempers are, okay, hold on. They are dread. Speaking of Drummond, Frolic, which is the tattoo he has on his hand,
All right.
right? The other Malice.
Mm.
So they've kind of equated the four main characters as, simulacrums for those four tempers. But that scene at the end of episode 1, where Cold Harbor is going on, and you see the flash of the screen, Cold Harbor, he is actually sorting those into boxes under Gemma's face.
Hmm.
So it's like he's sorting her tempers into the four boxes.
Mm.
I have no idea the significance of this, but I find it very interesting that it's not just red, green, blue. There's also this four tempers thing happening. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is very on the down low. It's very
Yeah.
subtle.
Yeah.
And again, that screen was maybe for a couple of seconds. It wasn't up very long. So we didn't really see that. But I'm assuming it has something to do with his connection with Gemma. And that's why he can connect with this thing. And maybe Gemma was special and that's why she's still around. So there's a lot of implications with it. And I really love the fact that the other employees on this floor really are nothing. The fact that they feel something when they see these numbers on the screen, that also really intrigues me as someone
Mhm.
who is technologically inclined, and numbers wouldn't do jack for me.
Yeah.
So I just find that kind of thing interesting. Mark
Mm.
being either melancholy or malice or woe or whatever, he turns into all different parts of these
Yeah.
tempers. And is that an influence on them?
Mm.
And then secondly, it has 98% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Wow.
It is rare
Yeah.
for something to get that high of a score. So
Yeah.
I mean, love this show. I understand why some people don't like it. because it is so esoteric and very symbolic. So you have to think about it to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people just like, a procedural where you don't have to think about things. And I get it.
Yep.
There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. But man, I think this show is going to be remembered as one of the greats. And, like Fringe, like Lost, where people
Yeah,
continue to rewatch it and talk about it and all that stuff. So I am psyched that we decided to talk about it.
me too.
Jesse, you got anything else you want to add?
No, I think that there's a lot of questions we have. I'm curious where we're going to go next.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also curious is what is the long-term plan for this? Like, is this something, famously Lost kind of was the
Really lost.
yeah, we needed to have an end game before we decided, because we only had an X story we want to tell. And I'm curious about this one, right? A is there a end game for this, so to speak?
Right, right.
Yeah, like we know we want to tell this in 3 seasons, 5 seasons, whatever it is. And
Right.
whatever it is, I hope they get that.
Telling us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Because
exactly.
they're definitely keeping that from us.
Yeah.
They're,
Yeah. For
I
sure.
hope they stick the landing. And I want to go on record as saying I
No,
thought
me
I
it
either.
was
wasn't either.
fine.
I wasn't either.
Yes.
I think there was an interesting conversation when the first time Milchek came to visit Mark. He said to us two things that were very interesting to me. When Mark asked about Gemma, Milchek says, "You're choking on her ghost," which I
Mm-hmm.
found interesting. And then he said to him, "The solace your innie feels will make it down to you." And I
Right,
thought, down? Wouldn't it be up?
right.
Wouldn't it be up?
No,
But
Lumen is
then you see go back to the trailer and you see how he's going down in the basement and how that the needle with the severance
Hmm.
capsule is way deep in there.
he not answer a question directly.
No.
Nobody can.
He dances around
Yeah,
every
yeah. So here we sit at the end of episode 2. We've got lots of big questions. I think the big two are, is Helly severed in season 2 or not? And of course, the other one is, what is Cold Harbor?
Gemma alive. I think that has to do with Cold Harbor.
They're all, Gemma and Cold Harbor are related for sure. So that's where we sit right now. And episode 3 has the interesting title of Who is Alive? So that will
Yeah,
be interesting to see what that's all about.
I
And
can't wait.
uh, so it's been a blast talking to you guys about this episode. This is one of those generational shows so far that's caught everybody's imagination. I really feel that the shorter episode run for each season helps the show, makes it tighter. Otherwise, we'd have a lot of fluffing around if they were trying to do 22 episodes like this every season. But yeah, that's a wrap for us. I hope you all enjoyed our conversation. I want to thank my co-host as always, Jesse. Where can people find out more about you?
I am at Jesse Jackson DFW on X Twitter, and you can find me on Facebook, Jesse Jackson. You can hear me talking music on Set Lusting Bruce and Doctor Who on Next Stop Everywhere.
Awesome. Karen.
I am at Oliveria on the various social medias.
Okay, and I can be found on my YouTube channel, Lose Reviews, where we're almost done our flagship show there, Babylon 5. Of course, this podcast is now on our JKL Media Reviews podcast YouTube channel. You can find me on Twitter at Lou W. Sixma and same as Blue Sky. Hope you're all enjoying our journey with this. I know there's a lot of social content out there, so it's going to be hard to stand out, but because this is such a generational show, I think it's well worth the amount of bandwidth that it's getting right now on social media. And with that, we leave you till next episode, which Jesse will lead, and we're looking forward to seeing a blue view of
Mm.
Severance. Take care now. Bye bye.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
And scene.
Yay.
Wow, I
Yay.
love talking about this show.
The proceeding has been a JKL Media production.